Anzi dhiriho rairo vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Dhiriho rairo vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Gara mudhiriho vakomana vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Mudhiriho musatambe navo vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Gara mudhiriho ravakomana. Mudhiriho rarembanje vanogara mudhiriho vakomana vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Gara mudhiriho musatambe navo vanogara mudhiriho rarembanje. Mudhiriho ravakomana. Dhiriho mukoma Sylvester Daruinga muri sei? Atitai madzima apo zviri kufamba here veukama. Hanzi svikaitiinzwe tinombotaura hanzi kukurigo updates. Pane a lot of Hichilema convened SADC summit on Zimbabwe pool DRC crisis. Mkomadeni zviri sei? SADC Troika chair and Zambia President Hakainde Hichilema on Wednesday convened an extraordinary SADC summit which discussed Zimbabwe's just ended general elections and the DRC security situation, among other things. The virtual summit, according to a statement by the Zambian Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Ministry, was also set to be attended by Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is incoming chair of the organ, Namibia President Hage Geingob, and DRC Felix Tshisekedi. Additionally, the SADC Electoral Observer Mission COM report on the harmonized elections in the Republic of Zimbabwe, as well as other impending elections in the SADC region, will also be discussed at the summit. The values and principles that underpin the promotion of democracy and good governance are also the foundation of Zambia's foreign policy, said Zambia's Foreign Affairs Minister. The summit was preceded by a virtual extraordinary council of ministers' meetings. Zimbabwe's election that is so Mnangagwa reinstalling himself on a disputed 52.6% majority vote was followed by a damning SADC Observer Mission report that stated the coup was fraud and irregularities. The report, which invited strong disapproval from Zimbabwe authorities, said the coup fell short of meeting both SADC and other international benchmarks governing the running of free and fair elections. Little, however, is expected to emerge from the SADC summit concerning Zimbabwe's political situation, as the regional bloc does not have powers to order any rerun or reconstitution of any member country's elected leadership. South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa, who by virtue of his country's strong economy and democratic credentials wields relative influence on regional affairs, said in a recent interview with SADC, the SADC report only states challenges noted in the Zimbabwe pool but does not condemn it as not free and fair. I've stated two things here. I've stated two things of importance here. Clint, did you buy milk?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
It's yeah.
Oh, thanks, my boy.
No problem.
Close my door. I've stated two things here. Cyril Ramaphosa was interviewed by SADC, and he said the report only states challenges noted in the Zimbabwe pool, but does not condemn it as not free and fair. This was Cyril Ramaphosa's opinion, but the report invited strong disapproval from Zimbabwe authorities. Said the pool fell short of meeting both SADC and other international benchmarks governing the running of a free and fair elections. These are two contradicting statements that I want you to take note before I start reading the preliminary report of SADC, because that report, it stated that the elections, they fell short of meeting both SADC and other international benchmarks. Right. So Cyril Ramaphosa contradicted this point and went on to say the report did not condemn the election as not free and fair. These are two statements which are crucial in today's discussion. Two crucial statements which are credential in today's discussion. The first statement is about SADC report. That report, it noted that Zimbabwe elections fell short of SADC and other international benchmarks governing the running of a free and fair election. This is according to the report. But when Cyril Ramaphosa came on SABC, he said that report, the same report, did not condemn the elections as not free and fair. I am not sure whether Cyril Ramaphosa had read the report fully or just browsed the report, because the report condemned the elections, that they short for or they fell short of meeting international benchmarks or SADC benchmarks of governing and running free and fair elections. So these are two statements that I want you to take note of. Yes, I shared your live to many people to hear the important message from you. Thanks, First Channel. Thank you so much. So these are the two benchmarks. These are the two statements that I want you to take note of. Cyril Ramaphosa varikutiwo SADC observer mission report here did not condemn the elections as free and fair. But if you read the report, it says the conduct of that election, it fell short of the benchmarks of international standards of running a free and fair elections. Ziri say Petro Zurufamber. So if one looks at the report according to Ramaphosa, it actually says there were challenges with regards to a number of things that have got to do with the election. So we are coming to what Ramaphosa said, that if you read at the report, it noted challenges that had to do with the elections. And in those challenges were the same challenges that were stated by the SADC report, that they fell short of benchmarks or international or SADC benchmarks of running a free and fair election. So I want you to take note. I'm going to read the report tonight, as I promised this afternoon. So we analyze the report and see exactly what the report says. Because already, as I've mentioned in the afternoon, that the problem we are facing is SADC has killed the momentum of the election. the momentum or the fighting spirit of the people of Zimbabwe after that rigged election. Sorry guys, panpaipa patanga kuruma food. Pano nisingogara pana ndotanga kuruma nchikwenya kuita jobo ayone maronda chikwenya. So I've stated in the afternoon that the delay by SADC to discuss the issue of elections in Zimbabwe has slowed down the momentum of Kunjani Kodwa, Mr. Yuda Sukulele. Thanks, Tawin. Thanks, Wanda. So many countries throughout the world, as we understand, many countries throughout the world, they face electoral challenges. He quoted United States that it faced electoral challenges. But if you go to United States, I think the organization that is tasked to run elections has done it transparently. But our ZEC lacks the international benchmarks of a free and fair election. That means the SADC report actually condemned those elections as to be not free and fair. It condemned those elections. SADC, that's the problem now with SADC. It does not value Zimbabwe people's lives because it had slowed down the momentum. Because if they had decided this early, if they decided early, the people of Zimbabwe would be at a certain level of fighting for democracy, because that election was flawed according to SADC. So SADC, once it said flawed, obvious, that means it is not free and fair election. So we are going to read tonight. I'm going to look into exactly what this SADC report says. So we analyze the report together. Some of you did not have opportunity to read, or you did not get a copy of this SADC report. So I've got a copy of the preliminary report. So we want to understand exactly what this preliminary report says. The preliminary. So let me go straight into the today's business. Preliminary statement by His Excellency Dr. Neva Mumba, former Vice President of the Republic of Zambia, head of the SADC and head of the SADC Electoral Observation Mission (COM) to the 2023 harmonized elections in the Republic of Zimbabwe, held on 23rd and 24th of August 2023. This is the report that I'm gonna look into so that we can help each other understand this report. So you are free, ladies and gentlemen, whilst I'm discussing this report, for you to contribute. Those who feel that they need to contribute, you can do so. You can request to be added. You can type your opinion and so forth. So let me go straight into the introduction of this report. On behalf of the SADC, it is my distinct honor to welcome you all to the important event where I will present the SADC Electoral Observer Mission preliminary statement on the conduct of the 2023 harmonized elections in the Republic of Zimbabwe. The elections were observed in line with the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections 2021 and the relevant laws of the Republic of Zimbabwe. I was appointed as the head of the SADC Electoral Observer Mission to the Republic of Zimbabwe by His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia. In his capacity as the chairperson of the SADC organ on politics, defense and security cooperation, I maintained close collaboration with the members of the organ Troika, currently comprised of the Republic of Zambia and Namibia and the United Republic of Tanzania regarding the harmonized elections in Zimbabwe. The COM also benefited from the pre-election goodwill assessment report of and advice from SADC Electoral Advisory Council. The SADC Electoral Observation Mission was composed of 68 observers, 50 of which were deployed to the 10 provinces of the Zimbabwe, and the rest were based at the COM headquarters here in the Rainbow Towers Hotel. Our observers were deployed to Harare, Bulawayo, Masvingo, Matabeleland North, Matabeleland South, Midlands, Manicaland, Mashonaland East, Mash Central, and Mash West. During the pre-election phase, the mission consulted by stakeholders such as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, key government agencies, leaders of political parties, representatives of a faith-based organization, media, civil society organizations, and the head of International Election Observation Mission. This preliminary statement covers the mission's observations of the pre-election period and voting day activities. The mission's final report will cover in more detail the observations of the pre-election, election, and the post-election phases. So what Dr. Mumba is saying here is this is just a preliminary report that was produced by SADC, but he will submit a final report, and that final report will be in detail, detailing pre-election, during election, and post-election phases. So what you are seeing today in Zimbabwe, that means the SADC Observer Mission is still in Zimbabwe observing the post-election period. I've seen a number of ZANU-PF people abducting Triple C activists and assaulting them or trying to kill them in a post-election period. They are still under observation. So the final report to SADC will detail, will give in detail or in depth the pre, during, and post-electoral periods. This is the promise from Mumba. And this will aim at supporting and strengthening the democratic electoral process in the Republic of Zimbabwe as a SADC member state. But summary of the findings. This is where I mean Zimbabweans, they are not concerned much about summary of the findings, but they are concerned much about the recommendations, which are very important at this juncture. The recommendations of the SADC Troika meeting. These are what is important at this juncture. So summary, let me go into summary of the findings. He went on to say, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now wish to share the summary of the mission's key findings. These are key findings or major findings. A, political and security environment. After consulting widely with the stakeholders, the general consensus was that the country was generally calm and peaceful. No doubt muterere up. Political and security environment So the SADC Observer Mission, they consulted, or after consulting widely with the stakeholders, the general consensus or general agreement was that the country was generally calm and peaceful. I know Zimbabweans do not agree with this. This is not a correct assessment of the situation during elections, because during election time intimidation was rife. So you cannot say a security environment was calm when Zimbabweans were being told, like, look, you go and register your name at ZANU-PF exit pool before you go to vote, or after voting you come and register your name. People were told clearly that if you vote for CCC, we will know where you voted. So this is one point that I disagree with the SADC Observer Mission. That after consulting widely with the stakeholders, the general consensus or agreement was that the country was generally calm and peaceful. It was not peaceful because people were being forced. I see videos are there. We can show videos where even CCC activists were challenging ZANU-PF people. What are you doing here? Why are you writing people's names? Some of these ZANU-PF people, they knew they were doing wrong, and they started running away, leaving all these papers which we confiscated with names of voters. So to me, I say the polling day was not the security environment was not calm. It was not calm. That's the problem with Mumba. I know a lot of people were not happy when Simbachikanza was exposing Mumba. Sorry guys, so I'm trying to cover my legs. Sorry guys. Mosquito. UK ine mosquito yakaipa gore rino. I think zvinoshura kudya kweconservative zvinondodyiwa chete. So I'm not sure. This is the point where I don't agree with the Nevas Mumba. This is not a correct assessment of the situation on the voting day. In security-wise, it was not calm and peaceful because people were being driven to the polling stations, and ZANU-PF was busy writing people's names and so forth. We've got videos to trousers nema socks ndinazvo, but arikuruma mosquito yacho nenzara iri kupinda mumasocks, iri kupinda mutrousers. So this is not a correct assessment, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lie. On the day of voting, it was not peaceful. You know, when Simbachikanza was talking about this gentleman you call Nevas Mumba, people were saying, why can't Simba stop attacking Nevas? Why can't this and that? Because Simba, I think, had read this report and understood it. That this report is not a true account of exactly what transpired in Zimbabwe during 2023 elections. These guys were in their hotel room, Rainbow. They were not patronizing or patrolling the polling awards where people were voting. They were not going there to see the situation for themselves. It was like a command center that they had always stuck at the command center, receiving reports from stakeholders, and they are lying. This point is a blatant lie that was put by Nevas Mumba. You cannot say that the general consensus on the day of voting, the country was generally peace and was calm and peaceful, whilst we knew exactly that people were being force marched to the polling stations, told you can't read and write bring your name here, bring your ID here. There were tables set by ZANU-PF, written ZANU-PF pool exit, where names were recorded of villagers. That was intimidation. You cannot say it was cow. Someone is calling. I'm sorry, I can't answer you at this juncture. Point of correction, Mkoma Yud. There is point of correction here. The final report has already been handed to Ichilema. This was reviewed by Mumba during the interview on 3rd of September. Thank you so much. What I'm doing here is I've got the preliminary report, which probably set the tone for whatever is gonna be discussed by SADC. Let's hope in that final report Mumba has managed to correct this assertion that the political and security environment in Zimbabwe was calm and peaceful on the day of voting. This is not true. This is not true. Right. So, constitutional and legal framework for the elections, that was a point 2, which is a key finding on page 2, on a point 2, which is B. The mission noted that the 23rd August or 23 August 2023 harmonized elections in Zimbabwe were regulated by the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe and the Electoral Act 2013. According to Section 158 1A of the Constitution of Zimbabwe of 2023, general elections should take place not more than 30 days before the expiry of the 5-year period specified in Section 143 of the Constitution. The mission noted that this section applies to the duration and dissolution of Parliament, and stipulates that Parliament is elected for a 5-year period which commences from the date which the President-elect is sworn in and assumes office. But nasi zvan SADC troika yagara pasi ichokwadere. Ndo ndatanga nayo vagara avanogara pasi as such, but ndo vagara pasi. Saka I'm yet to find out exactly what was the outcome. So the mission, the mission noted that this section applies to the duration and dissolution of Parliament and stipulates that Parliament is elected for a 5-year period which commences from the date which the President-elect is sworn in and assumes office. The mission further noted that Section 144 of the Constitution requires the President by proclamation call to set the date of the general election after consultation with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Pursuant to this provision, His Excellency Emerson Mnangagwa on 31st May 2023 issued a proclamation fixing the 23 August 2023 as the date of presidential, parliamentary and local elections, referred to as the harmonized elections. The mission was informed that a further proclamation was issued rendering 24 August 2023 as a polling day in view of the delays experienced at certain polling stations. So this is where I am saying Mumba again should have noted that there is a problem in our electoral process, because we were supposed to have voted on the 23rd, but he saw Harare never got ballot papers. These ballot papers, they traveled from Harare to as far as Mzaraba and Mount Darun. They were there, but where they were printed, they were not there. This should ring a bell to Mumba. I don't think this is a correct statement that there were delays in polling stations, in certain polling stations. They were not delays. This was a deliberate move to make sure that the people in towns were not going to vote. It was a deliberate move by ZANU-PF. These are not delays, but a deliberate move. So he should have put a deliberate move rather than experience certain polling stations, rather than the delays experienced in a certain polling station. This is a wrong phrase altogether. He should have put deliberate delays by ZEC. We don't know for what reason, but this was a deliberate delay rather than delays at certain polling stations. Furthermore, President Mnangagwa also proclaimed 2 October 2023 for the rerun election to the office president if such a coup becomes necessary. Obviously, Mnangagwa knew that he was not going to win this election. Therefore, he had to proclaim 2 October as a rerun day for this election. The mission noted that this proclamation was in line with paragraph 4, subsection 1, section 3 of SADC principles and guidelines governing the democratic elections, which requires the date or a period of election is prescribed by law. Election management is point 3. The mission noted that the elections in Zimbabwe are managed by the ZEC, and the ZEC is one of the 5 chapter 12 of the Constitution commissions, that is independent commissions whose purpose is to support democracy in Zimbabwe. In terms of section 235 of the Constitution, the commissions must act in accordance with the Constitution, and they must exercise their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. Mumba angari mumwe wamunangagwa, so but Mumba cannot make that judgment because ZEC said it was because of those court cases that it delayed. It was not court cases at Elizabeth. If you go to Harare, people queued 4 a.m. Especially in Glenora, there was no court case in Glenora. But ballot papers were not there. I think it was in Kambuzuma where there were errors on ballot papers for the councillors, and they had to reprint them. So it was not about court cases. Court cases were probably in Bulawayo, not in Harare. Were probably in Bulawayo, not in Harare. So if you go to Harare, the whole of Harare had no ballot papers. And that people queued at 4 a.m. on the 23rd of August. And those ballot papers were made available at 8 p.m. That means people spend about 18 hours on the queue without a ballot paper. When a ballot paper came, people started voting overnight. This forced Mnangagwa to say 24th of August, people should continue to vote. Yes, so Mumba was not telling the truth. He should have put actual statement or real statement. There was no court case in Harare. It was only in Bulawayo and not in Harare. Yes. So we don't know why ZEC deliberately delayed the polls in Harare. Probably because they knew some people had traveled from South Africa, wanted to vote, and the following day they were supposed to return to South Africa. And people returned to South Africa without voting. This was the intention of ZEC, to make sure it disenfranchised certain voters, or disallowed or did not allow certain voters to cast their votes. That was a deliberate move by ZEC. So ZEC is supposed to manage our elections according to the constitution, and they must exercise their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice, which we never saw. The fourth point, which was Mkomadan Zangira Ejirize, the fourth point which was noted by this SADC observer mission on their preliminary report, the first report, the mission was informed that the delimitation exercise that was conducted in 22 by the ZEC was marred with controversy. In one way or another, concerned stakeholders claimed that the report that was submitted by ZEC failed to observe the constitutional requirements for such an exercise, and that there were also divisions among serving commissioners of the ZEC regarding the veracity of the report. The main allegations made against the report was that it constituted gerrymandering and that it failed to observe the correct methodology for calculating the 20% variance constitutional rule with respect to minimum and maximum sizes of the 210 electoral constituencies. Legal challenges brought against the delimitation report of 2022 were dismissed by the courts. The mission, however, noted that there remains questions regarding the delimitation exercise for the following reasons. 1. In its delimitation report of 2022, the ZEC rightly states that the Constitution recognizes the impracticability of having equal number of voters in each constituency by allowing the Commission to depart from this requirement with a stipulated margin. In this case, the Constitution in Section 16, subsection 6 stipulates that no constituents may have more than 20% more or fewer registered voters than other constituencies. The Constitution in Section 16 subsection 6A to F also lists factors that need to be considered when delimiting since they are important during the exercise. However, the ZEC goes on to also state that based on the provision of section 161, subsection 6 of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, then calculated the 20% deviation from the national average voter registration expected in each constituency, which was 27,640. This yielded a deviation of 5,528 voters. Since the average number of registered voters was regarded as a stable benchmark against which delimitation of constituents was conducted, the deviation figure was added to the national average to determine the maximum number of registered voters that a constituency delimited would contain. That means each constituency must have 33,168 people. Right, but each constituency must have 33,168 people. This is probably the maximum number of people that must be found in a constituency. Remember, my constituency, I wrote 40,000. Uzuma Maramba Pungwe. Uzuma Maramba Pungwe. I wrote 40,000. And in man's old hands, constituency, inofana kuita 27,641. Can I add 27,641? one is a 20% threshold. That makes it one add about 5,228. So eventually each constituency inofanirwa kuine vanhu haifanirwa kuine vanhu vanopfuura 33,168 each constituency out of the 210 constituencies. Mapabata ipapo kuti unozoona constituency yakarasana uzumba maramba pfungwe yakurova ma 43,000 votes. Vanenge vabva kupi? Ine 10,000 more people vanenge vabva kupi vanhu ivavo, right? So point number 2, so this was in contention. Point number 2, the mission noted that the use of the average number of voters per constituency is not consistent with the provisions of section 161 subsection 6 of the new constitution that was adopted in 2023. The word average appears in section 61A subsection 6 of the old constitution of Zimbabwe, under which it was permissible to calculate the minimum and the maximum permissible number of voters per constituency by using the national average as the baseline. The word average does not exist in section 161 subsection 6 of the new constitution, which deals with the same subject. The difference between section 61A subsection 6 and section 161 subsection 6 of the old and the new constitution respectively is far from being merely technical. This was a deliberate move by SADC to ensure that they eliminate other constituencies. Akatasana Harare North, Chibatanzwa na Harare East. It was because these guys, they used the section of the previous constitution rather than the 2013 constitution that Zimbabweans adopted. This is the delimitation. The third point that they noted also is in the new constitution and in the context of section 161 subsection 6, they have got right to say this SEOM because they observed pre-election period, so they can bring this in. They observed, they carried observations during the election and after the election. So they've got right to bring this delimitation thing. In the new constitution and in the context of section 161 subsection 6, the maximum deviation is 20% of the voters registered in the constituencies. The new constitution uses actual constituents by constituents registered voter population, not population to calculate, not Zimbabwe population, the whole population to calculate voter population, to calculate the permissible deviation from the requirement that constituents must have an equal number of voters. So mathematically, the two methods produce very different results and affect the equality of the vote with respect to the elections to parliament. On the other hand, since the country votes as a single constituency in the presidential election, the difference in the methods has no particular impact on the equality of the vote in the election. It was therefore not unexpected that ZEC would receive substantial criticism on this aspect of its latest delimitation report. Those who just joined us, I'm reading a preliminary report of ZEC pointing at discrepancies in our elections, right? So so far they've spoken about the election management, that our elections in our country are managed by SADC, and SADC is expected to exercise its functions without fear, favor, and prejudice. Right? So, after that, they went on to talk about the delimitation of constituencies which prejudiced other constituencies. Instead of using the 2013 Constitution of Zimbabwe, SADC used the previous constitution which Zimbabweans discarded, and that disadvantaged certain constituencies. As a result, this is seen constituencies like Harare East and Harare North being combined together, and the figures far exceeded the required figures of a registered voter or voters in a constituency. So the threshold value that SADC implemented or applied is supposed to look at the number of registered voters in a constituency, not the population. So SADC implemented the figures utilizing the national population rather than registered voters in each and every constituency. There is a certain number of voters that is required in a constituency. If a constituency has 40,000 registered voters, it would have far exceeded the required number. So they need to move the other lot from that constituency into another constituency. If there is still discrepancy, they need to create a constituency for Harare. Instead of SADC to have scrapped some constituencies in Harare, they were supposed to have created more constituencies in Harare according to the registered voters in that country. So, if we look at the preliminary report, point number 5 these guys noted was the voters' roll. Right? Some stakeholders decried the delay in the release of the voters' roll in a searchable and analyzable format. The voters' roll that was released by SADC is not searchable and is not in an analyzable format as prescribed by the Electoral Act of our country. So SADC acted with prejudice. It acted with favor. Some stakeholders expressed displeasure that the delay in releasing the voters' roll resulted in missed opportunities for them to audit the voters' roll and therefore give the public confidence about the veracity of the voters' roll. According to the SADC, there was, however, an opportunity that was provided for interested parties to inspect the voters' roll as provided by the Electoral Act. Yes, people could have inspected the voters' roll, but the electoral law says the participants or political parties that are participating in an election must be furnished with a searchable and analyzable voters' roll, and the SADC did not make that available. Mzaya more love and support. Mchengit. That end. What's next stage? We will see. Let me finish this report so that people understand the preliminary report. So in this regard, ladies and gentlemen, the mission took note of Section 62 of the Constitution. This section provides that every Zimbabwe citizen has the right of access to any information held by the state or by any institution or agents of government at every level, in so far as the information is required in the public interest. The mission also noted that in terms of Section 21 of the Electoral Act, the Commission shall within a reasonable period of time provide any person who requests it and who pays the prescribed fee with a copy of any voter's roll, including a consolidated roll referred to in section 20, subsection 4A, either in printed or in electronic form as the person may request. Someone is asking that, is this going to help us as Zimbabweans? If you don't understand the preliminary report of SADC, then you won't see where we are going. This is why I've said, let me bring, because I got the copy, you know, copy a preliminary SADC. So if you are making a presentation, please refer to this copy. It has got very crucial information that you guys need to know. This is where you can deduce your way forward. This is where you can tell whether this is going to help Zimbabweans or is going to destroy Zimbabwe. So, access to voters' roll. Access to the voters' roll is also premised on the constitutional requirement that the ZEC must deliver fair elections. In the exercise of this function, the Constitution requires the ZEC to ensure that those elections are conducted efficiently, freely, fairly, transparently, and in accordance with the law. Following consultation with the ZEC, the Commission was informed of the conflict created by introduction of the Cyber and Data Protection Act, which enjoins all institutions and agencies to protect the privacy of information entrusted to them, viz. The provisions of Section 21 of the Electoral Act, where the voters' roll, although containing the personal information of voters, that is names, a date of birth, ID number, address, sex, is a public document open to inspection by the public. Such conflict has resulted in there being litigation around the voters' roll as aforementioned, where in one case an applicant does not want his information public, and in yet another the applicant seeks an order directing that the voters' roll will be availed. Right. So the mission acknowledged the above concerns raised by the ZEC regarding difficulties related to releasing electronic versions of the voters' roll. However, the mission also noted that the law gives the Commission discretion to impose reasonable conditions to prevent the voters' roll from being used for commercial or other purposes unconnected with the election. In particular, the mission noted that Section 21 of the Electoral Act provides that where voters' roll is provided in electronic form in terms of subsection 3, 4, or 6, its format shall be such as allows its contents to be searched and analyzed, provided that the roll may be formatted so as to prevent it being altered or otherwise tampered with. The Commission may impose reasonable conditions on the provision of the roll to prevent it from being used for commercial or other purposes unconnected with an election. So, apart from the above safeguarding measures against the abuse of the voters' roll, there is also room to note that as a constitutional board, the ZEC is obliged to give effect to the Constitution as the supreme law. In this regard, the requirement for transparent and fair elections instead of relying on legislation, the Cyber and Data Protection Act, that negates the specific requirements, in addition to the fees levied for access to the printed voters' roll, the mission notes that the above scenario is restrictive in terms of the access to the voters' roll by the interested persons, including political parties. Saka there is conflict here. Iri kutaurwa panapa nema observer mission. Kuti zeki iri kutedzera kamutemo ke the Cyber and Data Protection Act. Kamutemo akari unconstitutional. This is what they are saying here. The Constitution of Zimbabwe is the supreme law. Where this act contravenes the constitution of the country, this act falls. And what is then upheld is the constitution of a country. Aungarambewo kuburitsa voters law zviri required in a constitution yenyika. Uchitaura kuti pane ka act karipo. Most ka act aka is not part of the constitution of Zimbabwe. No. Aka kamutemo kakafana kufanana ne prison act. Ndati munzwisise ipapo. Let me give you my example. What these guys are saying here. When Inina I was suspended from work by the Prison Act, because the Prison Act does not allow prison officers to participate in politics. But if you go to the constitution of the country states that I've got freedom of assembly, freedom of association. So when you interpret freedom of assembly and association, a prison officer can join any organization he feels like he wants to take part in. That is freedom to association. That is according to the Constitution of Zimbabwe. But there is an act that tried to constrict the Constitution to say, look, you are not supposed to participate in politics, but I've got I've got freedom to assemble. I've got freedom to association. So that act contravenes section of the Constitution. So what falls? You cannot zima Constitution to allow an act. No. Not zima act. That act must comply or must be in compliance with the Constitution of a country, because the Constitution is the supreme law. So here there is an act here, the Cyber and Data Protection Act, that prohibits sharing of personal data. Saka ZEC cited this act to say because of this act, we cannot release voters' roll in a searchable or analyzable way. And they refuse. Political parties went into this election without a voters' roll. And Zeki is, you wonder, Chigumba akadzidza kupi law. Guys, I want to understand. Where Chigumba studied this law, that's what a judge. Because Chigumba as a judge must clearly see this, that what she is doing is wrong. You cannot deny political parties voters' roll, whilst the Constitution requires you to release that voters' roll in a searchable and analyzable way. Then you quote an act that contravenes the Constitution of a country. Ndosakata pane munhu anga achibvunza kuti zvotibatsirei. Ndozvotibatsira kuti understand izvozvo. Kuti Constitution is the supreme law. Any act ikaita contravene the Constitution, that act inodzimwa. Haimire semutemo unokunda mutemo wenyika. Ndo kuzvibatsira kwatoitita. Saka vanhu vakuziva kuti where was the contention here. Andimon. Saka tikabvapo tobva taenda pa point number 7. These guys, they noted point number 7 as freedom of assembly. Right. The mission noted the controversy emanating from the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, MOPA. It's an act again. Right? The Cyber and Data Protection Act is an act again. MOPA is an act again. But this MOPA now sets out a process for notifying the Zimbabwe Republic Police of the intention to hold a campaign activity. In this respect, there were stakeholders' concerns about the right to freedom of assembly for election campaign purposes, whereupon the CCC reported that their rallies were being subjected to unreasonable cancellation, and we saw that by the Zimbabwe Republic Police. We also noted reports that there was inconsistent application of the notice before election campaign gatherings, with certain political parties stating that the ZRP required a 7-day notice instead of the 3-day notice that is applicable during election periods in accordance with Section 7(1)(b) subsection Section 7 subsection 1(b)(2) of the maintenance of the MOPA. So this is another act that contravenes the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Both the Constitution of Zimbabwe guarantees freedom of assembly, but this act now restricts freedom of assembly. You are required. So Zimbabweans, instead of going to the police to apply to assemble, they should assemble because the Constitution of the country allows them to do it. And the Constitution is the supreme law. You don't need to follow 7 days of informing the police without a rally panap. No. Ukaramkyorera police murungo kumbira cheteji. Amsukumbira permission because the Constitution gave you permission. Murukumbira protection from the police. Takunoungana mapurisa pakati pa venue yakati yae. Kana mchikwanisa kuyazoti protector uyai. Ande murugunzo. Not kuti tofana kukumbira right yekuassembla. No, that's wrong. The Constitution of Zimbabwe recognizes freedom of assembly. So an act cannot if an act contravenes the Constitution of a country, that act falls. So the MOPA is unconstitutional. And ZEC ensured that MOPA was unleashed on the opposition and CCC did not campaign. It is the only political party in the history of Zimbabwe that went into an election without being allowed to campaign in a country where there is freedom of assembly. Thanks, Justice. Thank you so much. So, we go on again to freedom of expression. The mission received concerns from several stakeholders that the recent amendment to the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act 9, Chapter 9, 23, number 23 of 2004, which amendment is commonly referred to as the Patriotic Act, has resulted in a severe restriction of the freedom of expression, which is guaranteed by Section 61 and subsection 1 of the Constitution. So you see, ZANU-PF, it has been activating acts which contravene the Constitution of our country. Munya Brown Majid mzaya uriseko mzukuru mpana norowa zvokutadza kana kutextira sekuru message mpana pala kamzukuru kangu unofana kupota chitextira sekuru naye takapedza kutaura kudhara fana kupota chitextira sekuru mpana. Saka as please chimbopota muchimba driwora wakupana nyo aiwa driwora torowa my man, don't worry, rikataka tapedza because it's 17 pages. Saka andofarira ushingi wenyu mgoma. Thank you Jim. Saka tiri kufanirwa kuita sei kupedza 17 pages dzeripoti iyoyo, dzeripoti, then tozotanga manje ku generally how do people, or generally what do you feel about the preliminary report. So it touched on freedom of expression. ZANU-PF made an amendment to it made an amendment to Patriotic Act that resulted in constricting or contravening Section 61 subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The Patriotic Act creates the offense of willfully injuring the sovereignty and the national interest of Zimbabwe. Unoshadza kuti munhu anoisa mutemo yakadai so ndiani? Hanzi, you willfully injure the sovereignty and national interests of Zimbabwe. Stakeholders were particularly concerned that this offense is vague. Honestly, this is a vague offense where you will be charged of injuring the sovereignty and the national interests of Zimbabwe. Maona magandanga enyaya akaenda kuhondo. Those akaenda kuhondo guys. Mainzwa ere the Patriotic Act. It creates an offense. Yekuti you willfully injured the sovereignty and the national interests of Zimbabwe. Unenge waita sei? Kuna vanhu vanoziva mutemo mboyai panapa. Unenge waita sei kunzi iwewe you have willfully injured the sovereignty of Zimbabwe and you have willfully injured the interests of Zimbabwe. Unenge wapara mhosva yakaita sei? As Peter, as mikande pa YouTube, tunoikanda baba. Jataura mfesa ana upload aikanda. And more. So we don't understand. Could someone can be arrested by police, then the police will take you to a police station and they will lay charges against you of willfully injuring the sovereignty and the national interests of Zimbabwe. So stakeholders, obvious, they said this law is vague. Even if you hear what I'm saying here, it's a vague law. How can you injure the sovereignty of Zimbabwe? How can you injure the national interests of Zimbabwe? The law is vague. It's too general. It does not. Mutemo wakadaika aubate munhu nemhosva uyu. Because it's so vague, it's too general, and it criminalizes any communication between two or more persons, whether happening in person or virtually or by combination of both, which involves or is facilitated or convened by a foreign government or any of its agents, proxies, or entities. Of note was also the concern that even the consultations between these stakeholders and international observation machines could fall afoul of this law. It's a funny law. Zimbabwe is a country that enacted funny laws. You do not understand. Kuti mutemo ere wechi vakaita criminal law imbotudza kuti mutemo wakadai so unongopara mhosva yakaita sei. Because right now I'm live on Facebook. According to this act, I'm committing a crime. I'm injuring the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. Because I'm talking about stolen elections. So the mission noted that the Patriotic Act is incompatible with the spirit of Section 61 of subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe and the paragraph 4.1.2 of the Elections Act of the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, which requires member states to uphold, amongst others, the freedom of expression. Inga wa injured. Ayo Eustace, you are injuring the sovereignty of the country. The way you are writing right now, you are injuring the sovereignty of the country. Both the prison clip video na bitwenye and so forth. That is injuring the sovereignty of the country. Both that video, it helped formation of government of national unity in Zimbabwe, and the people benefited. So you already kuishora kwarukuti koko, you are injuring the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. Because takatoisa zvakatokonzera kutoita government of national unity kuto zvitochinja munyika. And so you are injuring the interests of a country. Utopara mhosva Eustace. I can even call Zimbabwe Republic Police with usungwe right now. According to this law. Ukazwa paipa nonzi Zimbabwe is a banana state. Those are zvoreva izvo. Pane 3 mitemo, pane mopa, pane ichi Patriotic Act, kozouya chimwe cheche chinonzi tatimopa, Patriotic Act neSIBA and Data Protection Act. Izvo zvimutemo zviri 3 izvozvo zvinoita kuti Zimbabwe ive a banana state. As anything spoken against the regime is deemed criminal, hence these vague laws. Exactly. But does this give us any hope of change? Mgomagambe, hope of change, iri mamuri, mumwe nemumwe kana une passion of change, change will come. Because this report, I'm telling you, it does not mean anything. I'm sorry to say this to Zimbabweans, that if so far I've read the generalization of the laws, this report is supposed to condemn the election. Once the election is flawed, then the election is null and void. This is what we expected from this report. But iri kubata zvimtemo zvekunzi vana tatanga chimtemo chinonzi ani chache chatatanga nacho chisiba and Data Protection Act, tikabvapo tikanobata chimtemo chinonzi MOPA ichi, Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, tikabvapo tikanobata icho chimtemo chamotaura chaEustas ichi, chinonzi Patriotic Act ichi. Zvimtemo zviri 3 izvozvo. Chimopa, come on, ndikunyora nechinhu chisiri bhilo. Ndikutsvaga ballpoint mondiregererawo. Chimtemo chinonzi MOPA, regaiti zvinyore pasi. Chimtemo chinonzi MOPA ne cyber and Data Protection Act, Data Protection Act 1, 2 and 3. Chimwe chacho chitachiti chinonzi Patriotic Act. Hanzi Chelsea 1 Brighton 0 chimboudzai vanhu. Zvebhora womana. So what do you think about moving forward? Maggie, I'll come at it, Maggie. We'll talk about moving forward. Let's finish the report first so that you understand this report. It's very important to understand it. Because a lot of Zimbabweans are just talking of things that they don't understand. So if we read, there are quite a number of people here I've seen who do not understand or who never read this preliminary report. This is why in that regard, parure preliminary report one ones we see. So the mission noted that the Patriotic Act is incompatible with the spirit of Section 61, subsection 1 of the Constitution, and the paragraph 412 of the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, which requires member states to uphold, among others, the freedom of expression. So in Zimbabwe, there is no freedom of expression because kunechi Patriotic Act. There is no freedom of assembly because kunechi nonzi MOPA. Kozoya chimtemo chekuramba kupa vanhu voters roll. So thanks for clearing that up. Thank you so much. So from there, takuenda nomination of candidates. The mission noted the unprecedented amount of litigation surrounding the elections, among others concerning the process of the nomination of candidates. In this respect, we further noted the protest and the litigation of Mr. Xavier Kasikwere, who believes that he was unfairly disqualified as a presidential candidate. However, this particular complaint was dismissed by the courts. Because this is very important. This is where ZEC shot itself on the foot. People were asking me, Kasikwere akauya muZimbabwe, which constituency is he going to vote? Kasikwere wanted to contest in presidential election. When we are contesting in a presidential election, the whole country is one constituency. Saka Kasikwere anogona kuvhotera chero kwaanenge afunga kuvhotera. Vatimupabate ipapo. When we go for presidential elections, akasiyana nema parliamentary elections. Presidential elections, the whole country is one constituency. Whilst my parliamentary, elections ane ma-constituents ekuziva kuti kana ndachida kuvhotera MP wekuhurungwe handikwanise kuenda kuBulawayo ndonovhotera MP wekuhurungwe, hazviite. Ndoenda kuhurungwe ndonovhotera MP wekuhurungwe. But kana uchifanira kuvhotera president is one constituency, you can vote anyway. Andiri mona. The purpose ya inozonzi harmonize the elections, kumeka sure kuti paunoenda iwewe unenge une 3 ballot papers. 3 ballot papers uchavhotera iwewe councillor, uvhotera MP, uvhotera president. Saka it's 3 elections probably in one, which means harmonized. Saka ZEC shot itself on the foot when they disqualified Xavier Kasukwere's candidature. Kasikuwere aifanirwa kusiwa ari pavoters roll onovhoterwa. But this was challenged through the courts, and the courts dismissed it. The courts aired. Andisema judge ekuZimbabwe. Zvinhu zviri pachena izvi. Plus mail the permanent report to thank you in advance. The premier report to Washington. Washington, namo ines isa number dzako dzefone bururu ku inbox then over ndaku isira pa WhatsApp. And thanks for the clarity. Thank you, Mgoma Rubaya. So what it means is ZEC erred in disqualifying Xavier Kasukweere, and ZEC in a judge. Let's not forget that there is a judge in ZEC. Justice Priscilla Chigumba is a judge. She should have known this before. This is an error of disqualifying Xavier Kasukweere, because presidential elections, Kasukweere is not coming in as a member of parliament. He's coming in for presidential election. And Zimbabwe as a whole is one constituency for presidential elections. So he can be voted as long as I'm Zimbabwe. So the mission further noted the stakeholders' concerns that the nomination fees for a person to stand for election have become too high and therefore restrictive to political participation. Zimbabwe, probably worldwide, the whole world, Zimbabwe is the only country that can charge $20,000 for a presidential candidate. $20,000, aisimari kutamba nayo. It is the only country. It is the only, The problem, Fochi, they use the personal issues on Kasukweere, not the constitution of a country. Kasukweere was supposed to have contested this election. And more. In June, the government, through the statutory instrument 144 of 2022, increased the presidential nomination fee. Presidential nomination fee was $1,000. It was increased to $20,000. Nomination fees for a constituency was increased from $50 to $1,000. These amounts were also cited as unduly restrictive to less well-off members of the community, such as women who lack the means. In this context, we also take note of the significance of paragraph 417 of the SADC principles and guidelines that requires member states to guarantee an environment of open contest with no undue exclusion and restrictions on anyone who is eligible and qualified to stand as a candidate in any election. Ziri say forget. Ziri ufamba. And on. Saka, another point that was raised by the SADC Observer Mission was participation of women candidates. As you noted that ZANU-PF had to make sure kuti muzukuru wa Mnangagwa contested presidential elections. Ndiye wani mkazi akabhadharwa neZANU to contest this election. Panga pasina mkazi. That cannot be an election. Yekuti maburu chete ndo anenge achitungana pasina imwe kamuka agenda kari pakona akwa. ndiani nditete chimuti chakabatwa kuzi pakaipa ripoti tainzwa pavakuda haisati yapera ripoti ka because ngoma Philip apa tiri kutaura matechnicalities chete eripoti, matechnicalities which were noted by SADC observer mission. Saka report iyoyi mukatati mainzwa musati manzwa the recommendations. Ma recommendations ndo amuri kubvunza kuti what is the way forward. The way forward is in the recommendations. Saka tikutaura ma technicalities at this report. After these technicalities, then we go into the recommendations of the report. What did the SADC recommended? Andimon. Saka tikutaura panapa kuti participation of women as candidates. Stakeholders that also included political parties acknowledged the significance of Section 8 of the Constitution and the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, which require that women be given equal opportunities as men in politics, in political, social, and economic activities. Despite the innovations that Zimbabwe has made, such as the provision of the 30% female quota in respect of the councillors for local authorities, the mission noted that a lot more still needs to be done to achieve gender parity contested elected political positions. In this regard, our mission was advised that in 2023 less women actually succeeded at their party's primary elections, and effectively less women stood for the National Assembly, whilst only one woman stood for the presidency. Amongst others, this could be attributed to high nomination fee, which was restrictive. Sorry, Ketim Zaya. Ndikatanga kueda panapa ino lose a volume. I will try to aid you. Regatanda bopedza report. Tashika pama recommendations. Tenge takuzuda vanzwa zvavanenge vanzwa panapa kuti manzwe. Saka I can add 2-3 people to this platform, but just be patient. I'm still on page 10. I've got 7 pages to go. Right. So the independence of the judiciary, in view of their significance in the event of legal challenges in the context of the electoral process, some stakeholders expressed the view that the judiciary is compromised by government. A key justification for this perception was information received from these stakeholders that the judiciary recently received a large financial and material incentives, which the stakeholders viewed as an attempt by the government to buy the loyalty and allegiance of the judiciary. Politics dzezanu dziri predictable. Ansadagine zvinemsoro here oro tatua maovets kabisira. Let's wait and see the recommendations. Alleged intimidation of voters. Right. Remember, pandatanga ndaverenga Mumba achiti it was General Kaum Paya, but there is an alleged intimidation of voters. The mission was informed that the rural vote may be compromised by alleged intimidation attributed to a group called Forever Association Zimbabwe, FAZ, which is said to be quasi-security intelligence organization. The group was said to have been deployed towards and around 36,000 villages. The allegations were that people were intimidated to vote in a particular manner and were warned that it would be easy to determine who they voted against certain parties. This also contradicts the point that I mentioned initially, to say, look, Mumba stated that the day of voting it was calm and peaceful, but he has noted here the alleged intimidation of voters. This alleged intimidation of voters did not stop even on the day of voting. You have noted, you have seen them vakaisa tebhuru akanzi ZANU-PF exit polls vachitora zvitupa vachinyora mazita evanhu bhozi vaivhundutsira vanhu vefazi vachiti tinotoziva kuti wavhotera papi andiona. But this report is sort of like self-contradictory, because they were saying pakutanga kuti it was peaceful and calm on the day of voting, but down there on point K they've noted that there was intimidation of voters. So this is a self-contradictory statement as compared to what they had stated initially. Right. Then we'll go and look at postal voting controversy. This was on the same day of voting again, when this postal thing was done. So you cannot say it was peaceful and calm. There was considerable concern from the opposition that the postal voting for the officers of the Zimbabwe Republic Police was compromised by the alleged coerced voting. There were allegations that police officers undertaking postal voting were coerced to vote in a particular way in the presence of their supervisors, thus compromising the secrecy of vote. That means there was no secret to voting. Katie, problem there would, if I try to add someone here, the volume goes. Saka, this is why I try to add people at the end of presentation. If the volume goes, we just cut it. Because if I add you now, if the volume goes, then I have to stop it and redo it again. So just be patient. I can add you at the end of this report, because if I cut it at the end of the report, I would have achieved the objective of telling people exactly what the report is all about. Because I am talking about this report, the preliminary report, SEOM. Saga, if I add you now, if the volume goes, then I'm forced to cut the presentation. Then I have to redo it again probably tomorrow. So let me finish about the report first, then we go into discussions. Those who want to be added, I can add them. Then we discuss what I've stated when you all listened to this report. Anymore. Listen to this report, it's very crucial. Some people did not get it. Analyze. Saka, let's look at postal ballot yataura. Then let's look at coverage of the elections by state-owned media. And it was the contention of a number of stakeholders that the state-owned media houses remain biased against the opposition political parties and candidates. While the mission noted some improvement compared to the 2018 electoral process, we also noted that the content of the public broadcaster and the state-owned newspapers were in favor of one political party, contrary to the relevant provisions of the Constitution. The Electoral Act and the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, which requires state-owned media to be impartial. Observations on election day. So let's see what they observed on the election day. On the election days, the SADC Electoral Observation Mission observed the voting process in 10 provinces of the Republic of Zimbabwe. The deployed observer teams covered 172 polling stations in their respective areas. The political contestants have continued to call for peace during this election period and after. The SEOM observed the following critical aspects at the 172 polling stations that were visited. 600. Number 1, or A, the environment at the polling stations was relatively calm and peaceful. A number of voters expressed concern due to lack or late arrival of ballot papers and poor administration at some polling stations. However, voters remained patient to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Point C. Professional and attentive police presence enhanced the overall peace and secure environment in all the polling stations observed. Point D. 64% of the voting stations observed opened on time. 36% did not open on time for the 7 a.m. stipulated opening time. Some polling stations opened more than 12 hours after the stipulated time. The reason provided by SADC for this unprecedented development was the unavailability of ballot papers, particularly for the local authority elections, and also due to previous litigation. This challenge was, however, specific to Harare and Bulawayo provinces. Due to the delays, some voters left without casting their votes, while others opted to remain in the lengthy queues throughout the day and night. By 6 a.m. on the 24th of August 2023, some voters in these two provinces had still not voted. Consequently, these delays also had a knock-on effect as they dissuaded voters from voting in the first place. Against this observation, we further note as follows. 1. Section 52, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act provides that for any election, the SADC shall ensure that every constituents elections officer is provided with the polling booth or voting compartments and ballot boxes, and shall provide papers including ballot papers. Prior to election day, SADC had assured our mission and other stakeholders that all necessary voting materials, including ballot papers, were available and ready for use before election day. The communication was made in the context of Section 52 A, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act, which requires SADC to provide information on the number of ballot papers and publication of details regarding them. On the basis of these two considerations, the subsequent information from SADC that they did not have adequate ballot papers has the unfortunate effect of creating doubts about the credibility of electoral process. Saka, what's the next point? The next point is to understand the recommendations of this report. I am pointing at the technicalities of this report. So the next point is to ensure that you understand the recommendations of this report. Ndo pane nyaya. Zvimwe zvese tikuitira kuti vanhu va understand vozonzwa ma recommendations according to whatever has been deposed by SADC Electoral Commission. So the electoral process, the credibility of the electoral process was in question. SADC was asked, are you ready? Vakati, yes. Ma polling stations ese taisa ma voting material 7 a.m. vanenge vavhura vanhu vakuvhota. Surprisingly, the following day SADC took 18 hours to deliver my ballot papers, my town, Harare and Bulawayo. So the voters' roll was unavailable at 1% of the polling stations observed, and was therefore not displayed outside the polling stations for the convenience of the voters and verification by party or candidate agents. During the voting period, And at 26% of the polling stations observed, not all voters who turned out could vote. The reasons advanced for this included voters were identified, but the names were not found on the voters' roll. And 172 polling stations observed out of possible 12,400 polling stations. Yes, this is the report. This is the capacity of SADC. So, zvakangofanana nekuti kana uchita a research. Tikarata research mu Zimbabwe, there is nowhere we can do research with 16 million Zimbabweans. But this is a sample. This is a sample. 172 is a sample that was taken out of 12,400 polling stations. So the results can be inferred. The inferral or the report can be inferred because this is representative of it's a symbol being representative here. So 172 polling stations, this is a sample taken out of a population of 12,400. So the result can be inferential. I think it's clear. So during the voting period, kuna vanhu vakatadza kuvhota. Vasina kuvhota, voters were identified, but mazita they were not on the voters' roll. It was not possible to establish the voters' identity. Voters were at the wrong polling station. This was caused by this delimitation, where it's just like asking 6 million registered votes from 12 million Zimbabweans. Yes, because there is no need or no point of carrying a research with the 16 million people. No, you need to sample. Vakaita research, vakadzidza, vanhu vakaenda kuchikoro vakaita science, vanoziva about research. Kuti tinoita kuti sample and sampling, method of sampling and resample. There is nowhere they could have covered 12,400 polling stations in this small report. There is nowhere they could have done that. So they need to do a sample of the population. Tenge taakudzoka ku research, my research articles. Vakamboita critical analysis of a research article. You understand what I'm saying here. So voters did not have a national identity card or a passport, or due to the absence of an official witness in confirming an elector's identity. So 8% of the polling stations observed were not accessible to voters living with a disability. 50% of the polling stations, voters living with disabilities, the elderly and the pregnant women were not given priority to vote. In 3% of polling stations observed, indelible ink was not checked on the voters before allowing them to cast their vote. Saka waingoti kana vota kunogona kudzoka vota futi kuno because ink yanga isingatariswa kuti wambovhota here. Voting, 97% of the polling stations observed, voting was free from irregularities. Voting proceeded in an orderly manner at 95% of the polling stations observed. Ballot boxes did not remain locked or sealed at 2% of the polling stations. As a result of the excessive delays in the opening of polling stations in Harare and Bulawayo province, at least 36% of the voting stations observed did not close at the scheduled closing time of 1900 hours, while some had not even opened by that time. It was announced that voting would be extended to proceed to 24 August 2023 to compensate for the late opening. In previous stakeholders consultations, a shadowy organization referred to as a FAZ was accused of conducting a countrywide exercise in electoral intimidation. Our observers confirmed the existence of this group, as its officials or agents were easily identifiable at some polling stations, as they were dressed in a regalia emblazoned with the FAZ name and were accredited local observers. These and other unidentified persons who were not polling officials were also observed taking down the names of voters before they cast their votes. In some areas, voters were intimidated by actions of these individuals. So it's another way that it's another point where this report is contradicting itself. As they say, on the date of voting it was peaceful and calm, but here now they are confirming that there was intimidation in some other parts where FAZ were taking down names of voters before they cast their votes. So this is intimidation. So in terms of security, you cannot say on the day of voting it was calm whilst people were intimidated, whilst their names were taken down. So the mission observed the closing and the vote counting process. A proper analysis of these two processes shall be provided as a part of the SEOM report. Now, recommended improvements in the electoral process. Right. Tashika pa nongonya yenyaya. Musaiva nga wakarara. Musaiva rere. Right. Apa ndo pandura kuti mutererese vakomana. Tashika pa nongonya. We have reached the apex of the art. Or the summit of Mount Everest now. This is where the way forward is here. If you don't understand anything on the recommended improvements in the electoral process, then paita nyaya. Right. At this juncture, allow me to recall that the SEOM is continuing the process of electoral observation in the post-election phase. As much the mission will not be rendered comprehensive recommendations, mission will not be rendering comprehensive recommendations and detailed qualifications of the election at this stage. However, the mission has observed the following areas of the electoral process and system that relevant stakeholders may wish to consider improving. Ndo paitaurwa na anonza anuya president of South Africa, that this report did not condemn the elections as not free and fair. So this SADC observer report regai simba chikanza ashaude muruma anonzi mumba oya. Because if you get to this position, you can tell the direction of SADC. Right. SADC is saying, however, the mission has observed the following areas of the electoral process and the system that relevant stakeholders may wish to consider improving, or they may not wish to consider improving. Right? One, he said, access to voters' roll needs improvement. In order to improve perceptions amongst the public, political parties and candidates, ZEC is advised to strictly follow the provisions of the Constitution on transparency, access to information, and timelessly avail the voters' role in accordance with the stipulations under the Electoral Act. Right? 2. Nomination fees. In order to enhance the openness and inclusivity of the political process, SADC is urged to engage with all stakeholders in the process of revising nomination fees for candidates and attempt to benchmark the revised fees in the context of the SADC region and Zimbabwe economic realities. 3. State-owned media coverage. The relevant media regulatory authorities are urged to ensure the implementation of measures that require impartiality in the coverage of political events by state-owned media. 4. Voting materials. SADC is urged to strengthen transparency in the process of the procurement and delivery of all voting materials, including ballot papers, and put in place a monitoring system that includes the participation and verification by electoral stakeholders. In addition, there is need for the Electoral Act to be revised in order to put in place clear timeframes within which these processes should be completed. Participation of women. Effective and practical measures should now be put in place at the earliest sitting of the next parliament to enhance the equal participation of women as candidates in electoral process. Apedza zvake mumba. I think these 4 recommendations akati iye however the mission has observed the following areas of the electoral process and system that relevant stakeholders may wish to consider. This wording, may wish to consider, this wording, this preliminary report, it seals all our hopes. It seals all our hopes that hakuna kwatiri kuenda neSADC. I want Zimbabweans to understand this. We are going nowhere with the SADC. Because here the recommendations are clear. The wording of the recommendations are looking to 2028 elections. They are not considering the recently completed elections. This type of wording of this report by Mumba is not a favor to the opposition. It's not a favor to the people of Zimbabwe, but it's a letdown to the people of Zimbabwe. Because he is saying stakeholders may wish to consider improving. The last point, he is talking about participation of women. He's saying effective and practical measures should now be put in place, at the earliest sitting of the next parliament. So already he is talking about the sitting of the next parliament, which means this parliament that has been set is the parliament that Mumba is expecting, that parliament to enhance the equal participation of women as candidates in any electoral process. He is not condemning the election. He is not saying the election were not free and fair. But he is putting recommendations for the next election, saying SADC should wish to improve these things in the next election. This report on its own, on its own, the way it was worded, does not give us a life, or does not allow us, or does not give us opportunity to have a re-election in the region. So this is the preliminary report. I am not sure what has been written in the final report that he submitted to SADC. Because if he was a gentleman enough to have observed these elections, he should have skipped skipped certain words, certain wording in this report. If you look at the technicalities and the recommendations are not telling, he was supposed to recommend on each technicality. Exactly. Thank you, my brother. Because he hasn't pointed at those technicalities. The technicalities render the election null and void. And Mumba avoided that wording to say the technicalities, they render this election null and void. Instead, he tried to hide behind a finger by making recommendations that stakeholders may consider improving. And the ZANU-PF does not want to improve this because this is where they steal elections. So if you read the preliminary report itself, it does not give hope to the people of Zimbabwe. So I'm going to give the conclusion. This is why Nashtaura Kunevanu would Chimbomirai Mbichana Nishike Pama recommendations. Because if you read the tone or the wording of the recommendations, there is nowhere we are going with SADC. SADC, on this observer mission, they failed Zimbabwe. So his conclusions are that, in conclusion, the mission observed that the pre-election and voting phase on 23 and 24 August harmonized elections were peaceful. He is saying in conclusion, the pre-election and voting phases on 23 and 24 August harmonized elections, they were peaceful. Remember, he pointed at intimidation, coercion, when he was pointing at technicalities. Now, he is saying they were peaceful and calm. Then he went on to say, however, for reasons outlined above, the mission noted that some aspects of the harmonized elections fell. I want you guys to listen to the wording of this report. Let's critically look into the wording of this report. The preliminary report does not help us as opposition, does not help the people of Zimbabwe. If you read the preliminary report, it is say, when he said, however, for reasons outlined above, the mission noted that some aspects is looking at some aspects. This is a flawed election. This is a flawed election. No, it's not a final report. It's a preliminary report. So, final report is based on this. I don't expect that the final report will be different from this. So, anga achiti final report make achapa a detailed account of what they observed. But the preliminary report does not shed light on the way forward of Zimbabwe. It seals the hopes of the people of Zimbabwe. It is looking at the next elections in 2028. According to the wording of this report, he is saying, however, for reasons outlined above, the mission noted that some aspects of the harmonized elections fell short of the requirements of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the Electoral Act, and the SADC principles and guidelines of the democratic elections. The mission commends the people of Zimbabwe for maintaining a peaceful political environment during pre-election period. If this guy was in Zimbabwe during pre-election period, he should have known that President Chamisa's motorcade was being attacked by ZANU-PF people. Chamisa was never allowed to travel anywhere in Zimbabwe. His motorcade was always under attack. Weapons, firearms were shot. Chamisa's motorcade yairidzirwa futi. Haibvumirwa kuenda kana kupi Chamisa aita kada kufamba oridzirwa pfuta kana kuti aende kupi otemwa nematombo road dzovharwa. Saka it's surprising me kuti ari kuti iye the pre-election period and the voting period were peaceful. The mission will release its final report after the validation and the proclamation of final results is provided for in the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. The final report will be shared with the ZEC and all stakeholders in terms of the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. Our long-term observation will remain on the ground to continue with the post-election observation until the 1st of September 2023. The CEAC shall return at an appropriate time to undertake a post-election review to determine the extent to which the recommendations of SEOM have been implemented and the nature of support, if any, that the member state holding elections may require from the SADC region to implement those proposals. In the event of any electoral disputes, the mission appeals to all contestants to channel their concerns through established legal procedures and processes. Instead, he is advising us kuti kana tine electoral disputes, we should approach the legal, we should go to courts. But remember, this gentleman said the courts are captured. He never is now advising kuti kana mune ma disputes amunao, the mission appeals to all contestants to channel their concerns through established legal procedures and processes. The mission urges all political parties and the people of Zimbabwe and all other stakeholders to allow the ZEC to announce the final results as legally mandated. Saka mainzwa final report, not preliminary report yeSADC mainzwa guy. Kana pane ane, only that I'm at work, sorry kid. Kana pane ane anything that he wants or she wants to contribute, this is the time. I've opened my line, my phone. I've opened my phone now. Those who want to make some calls, this is 17 past 10. I am closing this presentation by probably 10:30, if not 11 o'clock. So those who want to make some calls, can you please call on 07411 777 466. As Mabla Shepherd Yuda, please note that the wording of the report was not Nevers Mumba alone. It was crafted by the whole team. He was just the messenger who delivered the report as was written. Yes, thanks Mkoma Amos. Thank you so much. So this is why I am saying SADC Observer Mission, it threw Zimbabweans under the bus because people hoped, before we saw this report, we all hoped for the better or for the best of Zimbabwe. But after reading, going through this report, I've noted some discrepancies in the report. The report is not coherent. The report is not making recommendations according to its findings in the technicalities. And those technicalities were ignored. Instead, this SADC Observer Mission is telling us that when Parliament sit, they must make some amendments to whatever they have stated. So they are hoping in next election these things won't be available. We won't be witnessed again. This must be first and last to sue this. So he is hoping, the SADC is hoping that the Parliament will amend whatever has been said and make this right. Ladies and gentlemen, before we read or before we saw this report, we had high hopes that SADC would at the end recommend a rerun in our country. That is now water under the bridge. I don't want to lie. If we need to act, I think the final report is not gonna help us. the final report is not gonna help us, because I don't see the final report to be different from the preliminary report, because the final report will be drawn from the preliminary report. I think the final report will come with the relevant information. Some will be edited. I don't think it will deviate from this, because we already atotaura nyaya yekuti parliament painosita inofanira kugadzirisa zvatataura muripoti munomu in future. Anditi maona. Saka so this is why I'm what are guidelines? Question yasho yakuda definition of guidelines. Anyway, tinogona kutsvaga dictionary meaning of guidelines kuti vanhu understand tipindure mubvunzo kuti chinonzi guidelines chii. A line which one is online dictionary. But now we have got an insight into probably the Mkuma Shapiro Ernest Zurufambar. We probably have to pane pamboita miss call pata 3 vanombo phone panapa bed to west saka Twitter say now let's not pin our hopes on SADC, because chinonakidza nje president Chamisa vakaramba kuapproacha macourts, and we all know what was waiting for us kuma courts. Andibona murume we anga ane ziso, murume anonzi Chamisa we anga ane ziso, anga ane muono kumberi. Saka muono kumberi iwoyo ndo watakuda kuchotonera pamwe. The future will not happen that will underwatch. Actually, he is asking what the SADC election guidelines and protocols. All right, I don't know them, but when I was reading this report, they were stated there. My guidelines, they said that I can go back to the report, then ndoita point out mama guidelines angashitaurwa ipapa SADC. Mune ma guidelines mama angashitaurwa ipapa SADC kuti mutemo SADC unoti chi in terms of delimitation, in terms of election management. SADC ine mutemo yayo yainoisa pama election management, ine mutemo yayo yainoisawo kuti kana voters roll SADC inotaurawo kuti participants anofanira kuwanawo voters roll. I think freedom of assembly SADC inazvo, constitution yenyika inazvo zvese, freedom of expression SADC inazvo, my principles and guidelines governing democratic elections anotaura kuti SADC inazvo freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, nomination of candidates. I think SADC principles and guidelines that requires member states to guarantee an environment of open contest with no undue exclusion and restrictions on anyone who is eligible and qualified to stand as a candidate. Can we move forward? Yes, Tachingo Pindura Vangawaji, if SADC fails us, the Zimbabwe's case, SADC has already failed us. With this preliminary report, it's like a white elephant, a white rhino. It has got no value to the opposition. So what we are, way forward now, is for you and me to take action. Can we discuss it now? And road, timber. That's the way forward. We need to engage in protest now, because SADC has thrown us under the bus. This preliminary report has thrown Zimbabweans under the bus. So what we need now is to take action and make sure Zimbabwe is ungovernable. This is the time for opposition leaders to show leadership. Yes, that is the time now we are expecting our leaders to show us leadership. And remember, no elect my leaders bye tinenge takutarisa kuti hanzi Makaure regaiti mbona wa Makaure kuti I'm trying to add Mr. Makaure. So let's hope kuti volume will remain. Kana volume yapera, then I will cut the presentation. Sakana muchiruramba muchindinzwa kandai love nema likes. Both those out ipapa vanhu vachatanga kuchema volume. Kana volume yaenda, then we just cut the presentation. Muri kundinzwa here Mazimba? Yes, my love nema likes on arundinzwa. I'm trying to add, Miss Makaure. Put your phone yenyu ngaiende pa kuti mukwanise kundijoina. Don't put it on portrait. No, put it on landscape. If your phone is not on landscape, there is no way you can join this live. So your phone must be on landscape, not on portrait. Low volume. Tukunzwa volume yashoma. Muchiri kunzwika umwe ndisi kunzwika umwe volume yashoma. No problem, no answer from guests. Yaramba, because your phone must be like this, not like this. No, it must be like this for you to manage, for you to join me. Your phone must be on landscape, not on portrait. Time to burn everything. No, it's not time to burn everything. We need to engage in peaceful protests. Any outcome from the extraordinary summit, which was held today. And Sandanzwa, we will hear tomorrow. Volume, please. Volume, Bo. Vamwe vari kuti havasi kundinzwa. Vamwe vari kuti vari kundinzwa. Ndava phone up. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Nkoma Victor. Right, if you can't join me here, you can call me you can use my go out and come back Makaure. You can use if you can phone me on WhatsApp, you can call me direct if you are in the UK. My number is 07411 777 so you can ring me direct on this phone, or you can ring me direct on this phone, or you can ring on WhatsApp if you fail to join here. Hanzi Makaure budai muzodzoka futi, but dzokai phone yenyu yakadai nai hanzi we can hear you. Saka SADC has thrown Zimbabweans under the bus. I am not sure the outcome of the what they deliberated on. Azine ateta murisei ndakasimba. Saka all those guys varoda kupinda, varoda kufona, you can call me on 07411 777 pin your number 00044 7411 466. So that is my number. Can I pin it? Those who want to call. I meant to say, you gramba upinika number yacho. I mean, kopa ipapa, you gramba upinika. Those who want to call, those who want to contribute, those who are on the way forward, say, this is an opportunity for you to call and give us your side of story, your opinion. What do you think about this SADC preliminary report? Post atisataiverenga isusu definitely zvakataurwa naMbeki zvekuti haina kukondema election, haina because vari kutotaura zvekusita kweparliament. Kana parliament yasita yogadzirisa mutemo. It was only Troika yasangana and they were looking on ngazvisununguru tega nothing will come easy. Yeah, iyo nyaya yekuda kutarisira maorganization mamwe kuti atibatsire iyoyo, we must stop it. Let's reflect kwatakabva nekwatiri kuenda. Right, there is my number, ladies and gentlemen. Those who want to call, you can call, but don't injure the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. Otherwise, a patriotic act will be on your neck. Kana uri kuZimbabwe, hanzi you injure the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. Hanzi mhosva. Yeah. Pakaoma. Uyaitinzwe. Hapana ari kufona. Kana pasina ari kufona, this is 10:30. And I'm at work. My way forward is simple. Tipei for way forward. Vanda kunyora way forward yao munonyora ndoverenga. Vanda kunyora way forward yao munonyora ndoverenga. Vari kufunga kuti they want to call. I've given you my number. You can call. We want organization to help us with guns. Mkoma Shepherd Yuda. Atete Sheila, thank you so much. A lot of Zimbabweans are opting for an armed struggle against ZANU-PF because definitely there is nowhere ZANU-PF is gonna let this thing go. There is nowhere ZANU-PF is gonna allow free and fair elections to happen in Zimbabwe. So this is exactly what Ian Smith did when he was not allowing the people of Rhodesia to have a free and fair election. The people of Rhodesia eventually decided to arm themselves and fight the oppression of Ian Smith regime. SADC is the most peaceful region in Africa. So as long as there is some semblance, I no need for 5 more years. Let us go fight. One caller here. Hello, caller.
Mukoma Shepherd Yuda, makadini.
Ndakasimba baba, makadi.
Ndiwa makaore ndatadza kujoina saka ndazoita zvekufona.
Alright, makaore. Alright, taurai tinzwe baba.
Thank you so much, nekuti educator. We learn a lot from you and we taona zvakawanda.
Thank you baba.
I'm in South Africa.
Yeah.
The only way to go is to fight.
Definitely.
This is the same government which is endorsing these rigged elections. Cyril Ramaphosa said it all. From your observation, it shows that whatever Cyril was saying to UN, it says all. SADC never said the election was not free and fair. There was only challenges. So we are saying, kana paine vakateerera vari muno muSouth Africa, we need to engage tumapato twakaita sana dhudhula turi kunetsa munomu turi kurova nekudzinga ma-illegal immigrants. To explain kuti ndo zvinhu zviri munyika medu mu. Let's go and close the border. If we close the border, Cyril, that's the only language which he can hear. Because Cyril is the most dangerous man in SADC. Cyril is protecting his interest. The only country in SADC who doesn't have its currency, it's Zimbabwe. We are using US dollars. That's why people could find dollars under his mattress and sofas. They were from Zimbabwe. These are our resources which they are taking with his brother friend. That's why he's protecting him. So as much as Mumba watiri kutaura is on tight because now he's being attacked from the SADC region. So this is very sad because Zimbabweans we are not united. Let us unite. Tiri kuita ma-demonstrations kuno last 2 weeks were there at embassy, but ma-demonstrations ekunana embassy haabatsiri because they didn't even bother even to open or to receive our petition. So the only way to go is kana paine vari kuteerera especially vari muSouth Africa, let us unite. Let us go and close the border and tell the ordinary poor South Africans that we want to go back home. Toda kuenda kumusha, we don't want to hatisoda kuchatora mabasa enyu munana Shoprite, but your leadership, South African government is responsible for all our suffering. South African government is benefiting from our suffering. They don't care about any ordinary Zimbabwean citizen. That's why, Mauna, they are the ones who go to manipulate SADC. As for SADC, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And the pane warukuti hanzi Chamisa is weak. He's not weak. Guys, we are dealing with a dangerous creature. Mnangagwa is not a human being. He's an animal. So, akangomaka kungoti pakangoitika chinhu. He will kill one. One vari muZimbabwe, it's said kuti they can never do anything. But isusu tiri mudiaspora, hondo inotorwiwa nevari kudiaspora iyo ZANU-PF neZAPU kuti wahwine hondo, wahwine Smith. They were fighting vari kunana Mozambique. So, I'm encouraging people who are in South Africa, let us unite, let us leave this big brother thing. Let's come together, let's go and close the border. They were saying on 7th, we need to close the border. Yes, we have to close the border to show that South African citizens, we want to go back home. But your government is responsible for our suffering. I think it was not.
Thank you so much, Mkoma. Thank you so much for a bright idea, encouraging the people of Zimbabwe to take action. Unfortunately, pana gidi zivane. That's why I say burn and destroy everything using petrol bombs. We don't need to destroy Zimbabwe, because even if we manage to remove ZANU-PF by force, we need to build our country. I don't think we need to go destroy buildings, to go destroy things using petrol bombs and so forth. That does not bring peace to our country.
And adding on that, I don't know where he's saying we must destroy. Remember, the Zimbabwe is under military rule. Anybody who try to do those things, you might end up in jail.
Yeah, problem. You know what? In addition to what you have stated here, kuZimbabwe kune mtemo kusatambo muro.
Yes. If they don't have shame on people like Job Sikala in Ngarivume, who am I? Guys, people are dying. I am from Makoni South, whereby we are being bullied. Wachita zvavanoda. Chennai won election, but vananyakuyedzwa wakaenda vakandopa results nefazi yavo kumapurazi kune vanhu vatisingazivi. On my mother's funeral on the 10th of June, they wanted to come and bully us. No, we don't do this. So, guys, Zimbabwe, we are with you in this struggle. That's why you see we contributed a lot as diaspora in terms of even Marigalia. We were doing it. So, panotaurwa paipa musazonyanya kutaura muchiti makadii kuuya. Now we want to start war tiri kuno kunze, especially in South Africa. South Africa contributed the suffering of Zimbabwe for years and years. South Africa, with Ramaphosa, he had the audacity to use his people's taxpayers' money to go to United Nations to call for removal of sanctions against Mnangagwa, but he doesn't address the cause of sanctions. Meaning he doesn't care about an ordinary citizen, not only Zimbabweans, even our fellow South African brothers. If you are here listening, today it's us Zimbabwe, tomorrow it's you. This kind of leadership which Ramaphosa is displaying. Ramaphosa is the most evil South African president which I never see. This guy is not worried about us, but he has to kill us now. As much as Mnangagwa is killing people in Zimbabwe, Ramaphosa must also kill us here. He has to kill us. He has to finish all Zimbabweans who are here. Because Ramaphosa, he cannot continue manipulate SADC in such way that he goes there. He is the one. You, if I'm 100% agree with you, Mkomayuda, because your observation with what Ramaphosa said ku UN zviri kuenderana kuti akati election was free and fair, only my challenges kana machallenges zviri kureva kuti government iripo illegitimate, so government iripo ndo inofanira kugadzirisa machallenges. And I saluted some fellow SADC leaders like Wanana President Chakwera. I was thinking, no, we are the first people taking pictures with this guy, but they are showing him, no, we are not together. I also saluted Wanana President Mokwetsi Masisi of Botswana. I shame on you, President Ramaphosa Ngobu, neuyu yokumozambique uyu andisina chaanoziva. But anyway, those people who are in South Africa, yes.
Chimputukezi chirabishi chacho.
Chirabishi chisina chachinoziva chekuti chikatongoona mapikicha. And I feel sorry for pese pangoonekwa wese ari kupfuura akutodhonzerwa nzwi, come let's take pictures. It's said that our leader, I know this guy who claimed to be our leader, he was in UK. Look at people which he was interacting with, and check other leaders like Wanana Paul Kagame, which people were they interacting with. He was interacting with Wana Ramaphosa Mbava.
Nana Tony Blair, vakapera pano kanonaka kudhara.
Hey. Ramaphosa, as well as my South African, they have to open their eyes. Kuti my US dollars akawanikwa paspenditures nemasofa ari kubva gold mafia. Gold mafia iri kuitwa muZimbabwe. Zimbabwe ndo isina its currency now, which is using US dollar. So there's no any other country. My US dollar haana kukuya nendege. Dai akauya nendege vanhu vari kuziva kuti indege ipi yakauya nawo. Akakrosa nepaboard apo. Akauya munomu. That's why you see Ramaphosa, he doesn't even have shame. South African government behave like they owe Zimbabwe a lot. It's said that now, as South Africa, I'm telling you what is happening. If there are people who are listening, I think they can witness with Randruta Raichowadi. One warukugara kuma high density suburbs, Zakata Sana Mamelodi, Soshangue, Mapurisa Arguita operation. Murukuburutswa kana usina passport, what they are arresting you. My hospital, they are harassing us. I was at hospital and they are continue telling us they are also charging us. And our president, yes, and people like Dudula, they are saying go out. Kana makatarisa mukatarisa the names which we were given, we are being called thugs. We are being called criminals.
Kwelekwelez.
Because no, kwele it's okay because it's a word you are not part of us. But we are not thugs. We are not criminals. Being a foreigner doesn't mean you are a criminal. Being a foreigner doesn't mean that you are a thug. Yes, those who are doing that, we are really against that, and we could.
Time yedu ndo yakutiza saka ngoti gaga titore one last call and then tobata call it quits.
Yes, so I'm urging people who are in South Africa, let us unite. Let us leave the big brother. We have a problem. Meeting. Let us unite. South Africans. Let us go and close the border. If Cyril Ramaphosa will kill us, let him kill us. The same thing which he did in Marikana. Let him kill us. Because he's being instructed to kill us by Mnangagwa. So let us him kill us. Thank you so much, Ngoma. I really appreciate for the time. Thank you, people of Zimbabwe. Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate.
Thank you, Mr. Makaure. Thank you so much. Let me get one caller, and then I'll call it quits. 11:15 now. I'm not sure. Someone who was calling. I'm calling back. I'm calling back, and then this is our last caller. And then and over and I call it quits. Hello, caller. Ndakasimba zviri kudini? Nyika yedu yadona ndochokwadi.
Anyway, kana material voice note rangu ndandichiti inini as long as tine mayuth akanyarara muntaraunda kuchingori nevanhu vakaita seni vari concerned mamudhara ine mutori kudhara kofangwa isusu vapana tisitofangwa muri kuona show yenyu inofangwa chimhanyiwa nemuyuth noti nemi as long as tisati tawana mayuth ari serious hapana kwatiri kuenda because munoona kuti anyone ane more than 35 years muzimbabwe number one ane mwana anotya kusungwa akasungwa kwamwana wake achaita sei
musara asina chekudya
anosara asina chekudya ndiye munhu ari kuenda kubasa haana formal job haana payslip but they are doing something every day makuseni they have to wake up go somewhere and make money they don't have time yekuenda kunoita maprotest they don't muyouth ane time akurova guka muyouth ane time ari kuteerera holy train ari kusapota zanu pf ari kudrive range rover saka I think as long as tisati tagadzira mindset yedu isusu mayouth hapana kwatiri kuenda
hanzi volume yakadzika zvisingaiti
yangu
ndofunga volume
ndakunzwika io
taurai tidziwa ndofunga wakunzwai because ini ndiri kukunzwai but listeners ndo vasiri kunyatsonzwa
munozopasa message mozoipasa but that was my main point kuti as long as tagadzira mindset yemayouth edu emuzimbabwe hapana zvatiri kuita even ivo madhara achona pavakaenda kana chimurenga they were young very young they had nothing to vaibva kuchikoro vachienda musango
ndizvozvo
they had nothing to lose.
Yeah, I think ndichaita presentation one day talking about the armed struggle, how these guys left school vamwe vakasiya vari magrade 7 vana chiwenga vatoseka vakatiza vari magrade 7 vakabuda vakaenda kunana mozambique vakaenda vakatorwa vakanotrainwa somewhere. So what is required in Zimbabwe, my brother? We have got youth, we have got everything that we have. Kuti katikavati ngatisimukei tiende tinorwa hondo, they are willing to go and fight. But the problem iri apa ndeyekuti hatina munhu ari kuti connecta kuti kana muchida help zvaiitwa nana Mugabe kudhara vaitoziva kuti tikaenda kumozambique ana samora tikanotaura naye anogona kubvuma zvatiri kuda, tikaenda kuzambia kuna kaunda tikanotaura naye anogona kubvuma zvatiri kuda. And vakaenda kunana kaunda nananiko vakasvika vakapuwa mabases, vakapuwa zvombo, vakapuwa chikafu, vakapuwa chii, vaizvipatara vaizviwana ikoko, and they fought vakawina nyika. Saka
muri right papa, but I want to quote your words ekuti vakaenda vanhu nasambura mashawa vanokuya kuzimbabwe kuzovabatsira these guys
vakaenda ikoko kunotsvaga rubatsiro.
ndozvekufanwa kuita mayouth edu hamubatsiri kana musingazvibatsiri. I don't think it's possible.
I think mutoriro wakuwadza wafanawo
zvisingatomboiti ndara zvisingatomboiti. The most painful thing rekanibutaura chinhu the most painful thing inini I am 27 I came kunyika kunoku to do my masters. I finished my masters. I couldn't find a job in field. Not kuti I couldn't find a job. The job was there, but ranga tisina visa mudara. Izvezvi mugoteerera voice note nditori pabasa izvezvi titofamba tikutochenjana chemberi pana ndoroga nevisa ndoroga basa, and it's so painful zvekuti sometimes unombofunga kumana chembere iri kundishauda iri kundipfira indine masters momwe
oza andifokisa imwe nyaya so nyaya kutaura inorwadza iyoyo. Tina vanhu vari munomo vakabva kunana Zimbabwe vari mamanager kunana OK vari ma-CEOs ema-companies and so forth. Vakaya kuno mabasa nemumanager ari bude kuno. Unenge wakutomhanya nechemberedzo dzimakeo muchiti sweetheart uchibika tea uchiisa sugar, do you want a cup of tea? Apa kana dzodhota chembere dzacho dzapedza kudya dzinodhota zvoti ukapinda mainorara so unenge haufeme. Aufeme. Saka I don't think that is type of work most Zimbabweans would want to do in the UK. Saka vanhu vakuopta kuti let's fight back, let's fight for our country, let's go back home, because vamwe vanhu nema-qualifications havanawo muno munana UK vakasvika kunana Zimbabwe vanenge vari ma-CEO chaivo makambani, but munomu they are not recognized munomu. Aiwa varungu havakupe, ndakambotaurira mumwe munhu ndikati varungu havakupe basa rakadaro hazviite. Vandosarudza kupa munhu asina kuenda kuchikoro neskini yake pane kuti vakuti iwewe uya uite zvakati. Thanks mamin, time yacho ndo iri kumhanya. Thanks so much. Time ndo iri kumhanya guys. 10 to 11. I need one last caller. Ane zvivindi. Hands without guns kana reckon ngaishanda. Guys, vana vari kufa muno muSouth Africa just being a foreigner. I've seen quite a number. Ininda ndaiverenga musuno vafana vakafa kuZimbabwe, kuSouth Africa vandaiziva youth. Ndichigara kuchikurubhi ndaive nemwe mudhara taishanda naye ainzi Mutamiri. Ndaive friend yemwana wake musikana. I had a friend, a female friend, not a girlfriend, but a female friend yandaitamba nayo. Aive nehanzvadzi yake ainzi Andrew. Akaenda kuSouth Africa, was shot from behind, akanofira kuSouth Africa. Ndaive nemufana wekumaraini kwangu ainzi Munyurwa. Ainzi andiko mufana uyo. Tulani Munyurwa was shot and killed in South Africa. Ndaive nemuzukuru wangu umwe mufana uyo was shot and killed in South Africa. Sekuru wangu Levi wakanhongwa vakafa muSouth Africa. You see how many people vandoziva inini we have lost, but one last caller. I have a kata caller, I'm sorry. Saka tine a number of people vari kufa. Hapana kusiri kufa guys, vanhu vari kupfurwa vachifa munana South Africa, vari kusiya vana vacho. Zvinorwadza izvozvo. So a lot of things are happening in South Africa where we thought we tawana sanctuary. Saka let's get geared, ladies and gentlemen, to fight for our country. Let me take the last caller. Good evening caller. Hanzi manero akanaka. Finish. Ameno chiri kuitika kuline ravo kuti chii chiri kuitika. Ameno chiri kuitika. Anyway, tikatadza kuvawana mukoma, I think we will be wrapping up in few minutes kuti tizokwanisa kuita something else. Zvakawanda. Can I try him rather than inogona kuve network yavo, but is it possible I can try him and find out what's happening with this line. I'm talking about. Hello?
Goma Yuda, you called me again.
All right, sorry. Pane munhu ari kufona saka iri kuti achikata. I'm trying to ring him and score number yacho ndebi. Sorry, Mr. Wakaure.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Ndanzwa munhu anga achitaura zvemayouth asiri serious. Let me say, my brother, one are very, very serious. Remember, we are dealing with mathags and pfuti munyika mbuya mbuya. And tenda Mwari kuti kwauri ikoko ndanzwa chichirugeza chembere. Urukwana chaurukwana muno muSouth Africa ndo mune mayouth are undocumented. Anouya in 14 years, they are drinking mabron clear kuti vakanganwe nhamo vari kurara mumastreets wana and this is and vari kuurayiwa kuurayiwa kungonzi muri maforena wana vari kuurayiwa so my youth are very very serious and nyika yatiri kutaura nezvayo we are not just talking in an ordinary nyika tiri kutaura nyika yekuti ukaona wanana Kasukuwere waimbozviti tinoitonga waakuti hakuchadzokereki wanana Walter Muzembi nyika iyoyo haisi nyika maminista haisi nyika yekutamba nayo saka isusu kuno kuSouth Africa we are already ready for action and we are saying we are going to die the same way iri kuurayiwa vanhu vari kuurayiwa because of being a foreigner vanhu vaurayiwa nemitoriro iyo iyi yamamuchitaura nemadrugs so we are not afraid anymore you know what vanhu vari kuZimbabwe I was very happy ndichinzwa muchitaura kuti muchiti they were called by Samora and so forth wakaliberata nyika wasiri muZimbabwe they were outside saka for people who are in Zimbabwe musavafurira munovakuwadzisa ende munovaurayisa those guys are ready for anything as we are speaking of people are being abducted mukaona MP mayor achizvuzvurudzwa kusungwa what about an ordinary munhu asingazikanwi anongopondwa uchipuwa poison wachifa saka vanhu vari muZimbabwe we really appreciate kuti wakatiitira zvakanaka they voted wakavhota zvakanaka asi election yakabiwa saka let's salute vanhu vari muZimbabwe and as for advocate Nelson Chamisa as our leader ndiye munhu wavari kutsvaga kuti akangoti taurisa a statement obva wamuvharira that's what they are looking for because wakavharira wanarasikala up to now hawasati watongwa and up to now how many days it's a year now so these guys they don't have shame and as I was saying kuti vana Ramaphosa they are benefiting from what is happening in Zimbabwe they will make sure we suffer they will make sure that tichatambudzika it's different story nana President Mokwetsi it's different story nana President Chakwera that's why I don't mention them I mention about Cyril who went to inauguration and endorsed that election. He even went to United Nations kutondoisangweja kuti hakuna election inoitwa isina ma-difficulties. Utopawo example yayo ezvakaitika kuAmerica. Cyril, he will kill us. Guys who are in South Africa, let us unite. Let us unite. Let me not take people's time or a guy but guys who are in South Africa there are a lot of groups kana musina magroup kana usina to group ndichaisawo nhamba yangu ipapapa tibatane tivhare border tikavhara border that's the only language which they can hear.
Thanks Mr. Kauri. Thanks so much my brother.
Mazvita munandiisai nhamba yangu apa vanhu vaione ari kuda rubatsiro nekuda kuziva information yekuti magroups edu tiri kufamba sei vanotibata.
Regai nditi vauye kuinbox kwangu then ndobva ndavaita sei ndavapa nhamba iyoyo.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thanks Mr. Wakaure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Sorry guys, I think this is the number that was calling. Then we call it quits after this caller. Time yacho ndoyapera saka dzikangopinda dzongoti gaga. So where can we get help, Mr. Shepherd? You know, the most important thing for us to be successful in the struggle, we want to initiate its weapons and a way to recruit each other. Ndakataura mukomanyiyo ndikati I'm ready to leave the comfort of my house, the comfort of United Kingdom, and return to Zimbabwe to go and start an armed struggle against ZANU-PF oppressors. I'm ready for anything. If any deal comes up, I will definitely surrender everything to the British and say, look, Magaita Basa Magandichengeta, I'm ready to go home. I'm being clear here. This is what I've this guy is not picking up now. This is what I've always stated here, that look, I'm ready to leave the comfort of United Kingdom to go back home and fight, because the oppression that Zimbabweans are suffering, reeling under, it's I've never seen such type of suffering. We need to do something to free the people of Zimbabwe. I am ready to go home and fight. I'm not just ready to talk on social media and do and don't act. Inini ndiri munhu weaction, neida kuti zvandataura zvibva zvaenda into action. Saka ndichitaura kuvanhu vazhinji kuti if I get connected, ndikangoziva kuti munhu anditi enda apa Shepherd kutaura nevakuru ava, ndoenda kundotaura navo, ndovataurira my objectives, chinangwa changu, my purpose and my objectives, kuti zvatiri kuda zvii muZimbabwe. SADC has shown that it's not standing for us and we are lonely in this struggle. Let's not wait about those SADC or United Nations or whatever. United Nations is good to come. Look what is happening in Ethiopia. Yesterday, Papa, a nice fight. They were fighting nicely by airport. That was a heavy fight which occurred in Ethiopia. Saka, you find that Ethiopian government is going yasara a little bit of control of that Ethiopian country. And any time from now, rebels can announce victory against the Ethiopian government. And if you look at Niger, there were coups in Niger, coups elsewhere, coups in whatever other, Congo, Brazzaville, and so forth. The only country that is left in SADC is Zimbabwe, which is reeling under poverty. A country that does not even have its own currency. We cannot say we are a country. No, guys. We must define ourselves as Zimbabweans, and we must fight for ourselves. We must fight for our children. Anzi mukoma kuzvitangira kwabulawayo zvibudere. Kwabulawayo mandevela havatyi manje. But ndakazonzwa mashona akuimba kuti munovapireiko doro, munovapireiko kuwawa. So we are provoking them. Ndeveles are very nice people, very nice people. I've lived in Bulawayo myself. I really understand the guys in Bulawayo. Kana usinganyatso understand wakomana Bulawayo unofunga kuti ma-enemies, but no. Those guys, kana ati ichi ndochandoda ndochanoda, akati ichi handidi ichi hadi. Saka let's learn to respect one another. Let's respect the Ndebele people. I know ukaona dai tenga tina leader ari militant wechindebele. Baba Joshua Ngomo akaitanga hondo sekuseka. Akaitanga sekuseka Joshua Ngomo. Ndiye munhu akatanga the armed struggle of Zimbabwe. It was started by Joshua Ngomo. Vese vana Dumiso Davengwa, no, vana Solomon Mjuru, vana Chiwengawa, vana Mnangagwawa, when they went to be trained as gorilla fighters, they were trained under Zipra. Zimbabwe. I will come and make a presentation one day about it. So guys, understand. Hondo yechimurenga Zimbabwe haina kutangwa neZANU. Haina kutangwa neZANU PF. Yakatangwa neZipra. Mazipra forces ndo vakatanga kuenda outside the country for training. Vana Mnangagwa vanga vari mazipra. Vana Solomon Mjuru vakanga ari mazipra. Vana Dumiso Davengwa vanga ari mazipra. Vakaenda mazipra forces ndo vakatanga hondo yechimurenga. Ngomo ndiye anga ari head of everything. Saka vanhu vari kutaura kuti tikatanga neBulawayo muri right, because kuBulawayo ndo kune mawarriors. So I know kuti vanhu veZimbabwe vanongoratadza zvandiri kutaura kuti Solomon Mjuru was a Zipra. Mnangagwa uyu anga ari muZipra. Vakaenda kunotreneswa neZipra. Vamwe zvakazoseparatana, vamwe vatouya kumatrainings ikoko, zvakazokonzera kuurayana kwevanhu kumaZimbabwe gorira kunana Tanzania. Kuurayana kwavakazoita vakupandukirana kuti uyu muZANU, uyu muZanula, uyu amuZipra. But initially all these guys were trained under Zipra. Very, very muZAPU. saka iyo history isingade kutaurwa muZimbabwe, but I'm going to talk about that history. Saka ndati good night, 11 guys, good night. Regai nditori vana vachikoro ndigadzire vari kuenda kuchikoro mangwana. Morora zvakanaka. Good night. Anzi dhirihora vakomana, dhirihora rembanje, ivo vakomana, ona dhirihora rembanje, vanogara mudhiriho, dhirihora vakomana. Good night. Morora zvakanaka. Ya action ndo yakudiwa, ndo yakutongodiwa chete. Vosika zvana SADC kana United Nations regai vazouya kuti zoita pa negotiating table tamboridzirana pfuti. Andimona nyaya dzatiri kutaura kuti muZimbabwe tamboshekana, tadhonzana makora, tambohedhana, tamboita head party one another. Let them come now. What handei patable, let's negotiate. Then we negotiate on equal grounds. Yekuti vakada kuti vadai soto iwe andiona. Saka tinofana kunegotiata tine zvatakabata panoti tinonegotiata patebhuru. Takabata bhilo, mwakabata mabhazuka. Hazvibudi izvozvo, hazvibudi. Kana tikatataura free and fair election, tinoita mwakabata something kuti takabata bhilo. Hazvibudi izvozvo. Saka good night. Titoonana mangwana guys. Night night.